When someone stops calling you back, most people hear silence. But silence is never empty. Silence is information. And when she doesn't call you back, the mistake most men make is thinking the message is unclear, accidental, or temporary. They tell themselves she's busy, overwhelmed, distracted, or unsure. They wait, they hope, they replay conversations, they look for hidden meanings. But the truth is much simpler and much harder to accept. No response is a response. Not because she hates you, not because she wants to hurt you, but because silence is the most honest form of communication when someone doesn't want to explain themselves. People speak when they want connection. They go quiet when they want distance. And when a woman chooses silence instead of clarity, she is sending a message that words would only weaken. This is where men lose their power. Instead of reading the message, they fight it. Instead of accepting reality, they chase reassurance. Instead of staying grounded, they try to fix what was never broken, just decided. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If she wanted to talk to you, she would. Not eventually. Not after thinking about it. Not when things calm down. She would make space because interest always finds time, but disinterest always finds excuses. What makes this situation emotionally dangerous is not the silence itself, but how men respond to it. When you chase unanswered calls, send follow-up messages, or try to explain yourself into relevance, you reverse the emotional dynamic. You tell her without words that her absence controls your emotional state, and that message is louder than any call she didn't make. Silence creates pressure only when you resist it. When you accept it, silence becomes clarity. A woman who doesn't call you back is not confused. She is choosing not to invest emotional energy. And that choice, whether temporary or permanent, deserves to be respected, not negotiated. This doesn't mean she'll never reach out again. It doesn't mean the door is permanently closed, but it does mean that your next move matters more than her silence. Because silence is a test only if you treat it like one. If you remain calm, grounded, and self-directed, the message changes. You stop reacting, you stop chasing, you stop asking for attention, and suddenly the power shifts. In this video, you're going to understand what silence actually means, why chasing it destroys attraction, and how the man who respects the message instead of fighting it always keeps his dignity and often regains emotional control. If you've been waiting for a call that never came, stay with me, because once you understand silence correctly, you never lose yourself to it again. Before we start, a quick reminder, the real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube, it happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community, enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Section 1. Why silence is a decision, not confusion. When a woman does not call you back, the most damaging interpretation you can make is that she is confused. Confusion feels temporary. Confusion invites patience. Confusion creates hope. And hope, when it is misplaced, is what keeps men emotionally stuck long after the message has already been delivered. Silence is rarely accidental. In modern communication, silence is intentional. People check their phones constantly. Messages are seen, calls are noticed, and when someone chooses not to respond, they are not forgetting. They are prioritizing emotional distance over engagement. That choice may come from uncertainty, lack of interest, emotional overload, or a desire to avoid confrontation. But regardless of the reason, the behavior itself is a decision. The mind resists this truth because accepting it feels like loss. It feels final, it feels like rejection. So instead, men create alternative explanations that feel safer. They assume she is busy, they assume timing is off, they assume silence means she needs space but still cares. These interpretations delay acceptance and keep emotional investment alive in a situation where reciprocity is missing. Psychologically, silence functions as a boundary. It is a way of saying, I am not available for connection right now without having to justify or explain that choice. For many people, silence feels easier than honesty because honesty creates emotional responsibility. Silence avoids that responsibility while still achieving distance. This is why silence often appears when emotional interest drops. Not because the other person wants to hurt you, but because they want to disengage without creating emotional tension. Silence feels neutral, but it is not. It is a passive form of communication that protects the person using it while leaving the other person to interpret the meaning. The mistake men make is trying to reopen communication by force. They send follow-up messages, they try different tones, they explain themselves again, they apologize for things that were never wrong. Each attempt to break silence sends the same emotional signal. I am uncomfortable without your response. And that discomfort shifts the power dynamic immediately. A man who understands silence does not argue with it. He does not try to decode it endlessly. He recognizes that the absence of effort is information. He accepts the message without resentment and without self-blame. That acceptance is not weakness. It is emotional strength. When you stop treating silence as confusion and start seeing it as a decision, your behavior changes naturally. You stop chasing clarity. You stop seeking closure from someone who chose distance. You reclaim your emotional center. And here's the paradox. Most men never realize the moment you stop reacting to silence, it either becomes permanent or it breaks. If she truly wanted distance, your calm acceptance confirms it and saves you time. If her silence was a test, your non-reaction removes its power. Either way, you win, because silence only controls you when you refuse to hear what it is saying. Section 2. Why chasing silence destroys attraction instantly. When a man chases silence, he does not just try to restore communication. He unintentionally communicates something far more powerful than any message he sends. He communicates emotional dependence, and attraction cannot survive where emotional dependence is felt. Silence creates an emotional vacuum. That vacuum feels uncomfortable because it removes certainty and control. Most men respond to that discomfort by trying to fill the space as quickly as possible. They send another message, they soften their tone, they explain themselves again, they try to be understanding, patient, or emotionally available. Each attempt is driven by the same underlying need to reduce uncertainty. But attraction does not grow from the need to reduce uncertainty. Attraction grows from emotional self-containment. When you chase silence, you signal that her response determines your emotional state. You tell her without words that her attention stabilizes you and her absence destabilizes you. Even if she once felt interest, this shift changes how she experiences you. What once felt like mutual curiosity now feels like emotional pressure. Psychologically, this creates imbalance. The person who is silent holds emotional leverage while the person who pursues gives it away. The more you try to explain, reassure, or reconnect, the more you confirm that the silence is working. And when silence works, it is reinforced. This is why chasing silence rarely brings the call you want. It either extends the distance or produces a weak, temporary response that lacks genuine interest. Any reply you get is often driven by guilt, politeness, or obligation rather than desire. And obligation never builds attraction. Another important layer is self-perception. When a man chases silence, he begins negotiating his own value internally. He questions what he did wrong, he replays conversations, he looks for ways to fix something that may not need fixing. That internal collapse is felt externally. Confidence erodes and presence weakens. A woman may not consciously analyze this shift, but she feels it. The man who once felt grounded now feels uncertain. The emotional polarity that once existed disappears. Instead of leaning toward him, she feels the need to create more space to breathe. This is why silence often increases when it is chased. The more you pursue, the more distance feels necessary on the other side. What began as hesitation turns into withdrawal. The man who understands attraction does something very different. He does not reward silence with effort. He does not punish it with anger. He responds with neutrality. He returns his attention to his life, his direction, and his values. He allows silence to stand without interpretation or resistance. That response changes the dynamic completely. When silence is no longer chaste, it loses power. It either becomes a clear ending or it triggers curiosity. If she was unsure, your calm withdrawal forces her to confront that uncertainty without emotional cushioning. If she was disengaged, your acceptance confirms reality and protects your dignity. In both cases, chasing would have weakened you. Stillness strengthens you because attraction never returns through pressure. It only returns through self-respect. Section 3. What silence reveals about her emotional availability. Silence is not just a message about interest, it is a mirror that reflects emotional availability. When a woman does not call you back, what you are often seeing is not confusion, not timing, and not circumstance, but her current capacity to engage emotionally. And that capacity matters more than attraction alone. A woman can feel attraction and still be emotionally unavailable. She can enjoy your presence and still avoid connection. She can like you and still choose distance. Silence is how emotional unavailability expresses itself when words feel too exposing or too demanding. Emotionally available people communicate even when it is uncomfortable. They explain, they clarify, they close loops. Emotionally unavailable people avoid, they delay, they disappear, not always intentionally and not always maliciously, but consistently. Silence becomes a protective mechanism that allows them to stay disengaged without confronting their own uncertainty. This is why silence often appears after moments of emotional closeness. A deep conversation, a meaningful interaction, a shift toward intimacy. When emotional depth increases, availability is tested. If she is not ready to meet that depth, silence becomes the escape route. Many men misinterpret this moment. They assume the connection scared her because it was too strong. So they try to soften themselves, they pull back their truth, they lower their presence, they try to reassure her that things can stay light. In doing so, they abandon their own emotional integrity. The smarter interpretation is simpler. Silence reveals that she is not able or willing to engage at the level the connection reached, and that has nothing to do with your worth. Emotional availability is not created by patience, it is revealed by behavior. If a woman is emotionally available, she may need space, but she communicates it. She may hesitate, but she clarifies. She may slow things down, but she keeps the channel open. Silence, especially prolonged silence, is the absence of that availability. Understanding this changes how you respond. You stop personalizing her distance. You stop trying to prove safety. You stop negotiating closeness. You allow her behavior to speak for itself. And here is the most important part. Emotional availability cannot be inspired, convinced, or earned. It is either present or it is not. Chasing silence in an emotionally unavailable person does not create connection. It creates exhaustion. A man who respects himself does not compete with emotional absence. He does not try to be more understanding than necessary. He does not lower his standards to maintain access. He recognizes that availability is the foundation of any meaningful connection. When you see silence for what it truly is, your focus shifts. You stop asking, "Why isn't she calling me back?" and start asking, "Is this the level of connection I am willing to accept?" That question restores your power because the moment you stop trying to pull availability out of someone who is withholding it, you step back into alignment with yourself, and from that place, silence loses its emotional grip. Section 4. Why silence is often the clearest form of rejection. Rejection is difficult for most people to express directly. It requires emotional courage, accountability, and the willingness to deal with discomfort. Silence avoids all of that. It allows someone to step away without explanation, confrontation, or emotional responsibility. And because of this, silence often becomes the cleanest way to reject without having to say the word. This does not mean silence is always cruel or intentional. It means silence is efficient. It creates distance without debate. It ends momentum without escalation. And for someone who does not want to continue emotionally, that efficiency feels safer than honesty. Men struggle with this because rejection without words feels incomplete. There is no clear ending, no reason to process, no statement to accept. So the mind fills the gap with hope. Hope that she is unsure, hope that timing is off, hope that one more message will change things. But that hope exists only because the rejection was silent, not because it was unclear. In reality, silence removes the need for persuasion. When someone wants to continue a connection, they communicate. When they do not, they withdraw. Silence becomes the behavior that replaces explanation. What makes silence such a powerful form of rejection is that it places the emotional burden on the other person. Instead of saying, "I'm not interested," the silent person allows the other to slowly come to that conclusion on their own. This protects the silent person from guilt, but it prolongs emotional uncertainty for the one waiting. A man who understands this does not argue with silence. He does not ask for closure from someone who already chose distance. He recognizes that behavior is the clearest language available. This does not mean silence is always permanent. Sometimes it is a temporary withdrawal driven by overwhelm or avoidance. But even then, the message remains the same in the present moment. The connection is not being chosen right now, and responding to that reality with dignity matters more than predicting future outcomes. The mistake is believing that rejection must be verbal to be real. It does not. Silence is often rejection delivered quietly. When you accept that truth, something important happens. You stop taking silence as a challenge. You stop trying to overcome it. You stop proving yourself to someone who has stepped away. You choose self-respect over emotional bargaining. And here's the paradox. When silence is truly rejection, your acceptance protects you. When silence is hesitation, your acceptance often triggers clarity. And in both cases, resistance weakens you, acceptance strengthens you. A man who hears silence clearly does not lose power. He gains it because he no longer waits to be chosen by someone who has already made a choice. And that understanding leads to the most important response of all. Section 5. The only response to silence that preserves your power. The only response to silence that preserves your power is not clever messaging, strategic timing, or emotional restraint performed for effect. It is acceptance paired with self-direction. Anything else is still a reaction, and reactions place your emotional center in someone else's hands. Acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean agreement. It does not mean emotional shutdown. It means you acknowledge reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. When a woman does not call you back, acceptance means recognizing that she is not choosing connection in this moment and that this choice is not yours to negotiate. Self-direction is what turns acceptance into strength. Instead of waiting, monitoring, or emotionally hovering, you return your attention to your own life, your goals, your structure, your rhythm, not as a distraction, but as a statement. You continue moving forward without resentment, without drama, and without silent protest. This response is powerful because it does not ask for anything. It does not demand clarity. It does not attempt to regain control. It simply removes emotional availability from a space where it is not being met. Most men misunderstand this and think power means ignoring someone to provoke a reaction. That is still chasing just in reverse. True power is not designed to produce an outcome. It is designed to protect alignment. When you accept silence and redirect your energy, one of two things happens. If the silence was rejection, your dignity remains intact and your emotional recovery begins immediately. You do not waste time proving your worth to someone who already stepped away. You move on cleanly. If the silence was hesitation, your non-reaction removes emotional pressure. It takes away the safety net of knowing you are waiting, and without that safety net, she is forced to confront her own uncertainty. She either steps forward with intention or allows the distance to solidify. Either outcome gives you clarity. This is why this response preserves power. It does not depend on her next move. It restores control over your emotional state. You are no longer paused in anticipation. You are active in your own life again. A man who responds to silence with grounded acceptance communicates something very clear without saying a word. He communicates self-respect. He communicates emotional maturity. He communicates that his presence is a choice, not a default. That message is felt, not analyzed. And here is the most important part. This response protects you, even if she never returns. You do not shrink. You do not chase closure. You do not carry unanswered questions longer than necessary. You accept what is being shown and act accordingly. Silence only becomes a wound when you fight it. When you accept it, it becomes information. And information, when acted on calmly, always restores power. Section 6. What happens when you respect silence instead of resisting it? When you respect silence instead of resisting it, the emotional dynamic changes in ways that are subtle but decisive. There is no dramatic moment where everything shifts instantly. Instead, control quietly returns to where it belongs inside you, and that internal shift is felt externally, whether or not a word is ever exchanged again. The first thing that happens is emotional stabilization. You stop oscillating between hope and disappointment. You stop checking your phone with expectation. You stop replaying conversations to search for mistakes. Your nervous system begins to settle because it is no longer waiting for validation from someone who chose distance. That calm is not indifference, it is self-possession. From that place, clarity emerges. You begin to see the situation without emotional distortion. You recognize that connection requires mutual availability, not effort from one side. You understand that silence revealed something essential about the dynamic, not something missing in you. This clarity alone prevents you from repeating the same pattern in future connections. Respecting silence also restores emotional polarity. When you stop chasing, you stop placing the other person above yourself emotionally. You are no longer seeking to be chosen. You are choosing how you engage. That shift changes how you show up in every interaction, not just this one. If she notices this change, something interesting can happen. Without pressure, without pursuit, without emotional chasing, the space you create becomes honest. If she was unsure, your absence forces her to confront that uncertainty. If she valued your presence but assumed it would always be there, its removal creates awareness. And if she had already decided to disengage, your silence confirms alignment instead of prolonging confusion. But the key point is this: your power no longer depends on her response. You are not respecting silence to provoke a call, a back. You are respecting silence because your time, attention, and emotional energy matter. That distinction is everything. One is strategy. The other is identity. Men who regain their power through silence do not become cold. They become selective. They do not harden. They become grounded. They do not shut down emotionally. They stop investing where reciprocity is absent, and this recalibration affects future connections profoundly. You stop tolerating emotional ambiguity. You stop negotiating availability. You stop chasing clarity from people who avoid giving it. You begin to attract interactions that feel simpler, cleaner, and more mutual. Respecting silence teaches you something important. It teaches you that not every connection is meant to continue, and not every unanswered call is a problem to solve. Some are simply messages to accept. When you stop resisting silence, you stop losing yourself to it. And when you stop losing yourself, you never truly lose. In short, when she doesn't call you back, the hardest part is not the silence itself, It's the hope you attach to it. Hope keeps you waiting. Hope keeps you explaining. Hope keeps you emotionally paused in a moment that has already passed. But silence is not a mystery. Silence is a message. It is the absence of choice, effort, and emotional availability. And fighting that message only weakens you. The moment you stop chasing answers and start accepting behavior, everything changes. You stop negotiating your value. You stop needing closure from someone who chose distance. You stop giving power to what is no longer present. Respecting silence does not mean you lost. It means you refuse to lose yourself. A man who understands silence does not become bitter. He becomes clear. He does not harden his heart. He strengthens his boundaries. He does not wait to be chosen. He chooses how he moves forward. And here is the truth most men never hear. The strongest response to silence is not another message. It is a life that continues without apology. If she returns, she meets you where you are, not where you waited. If she doesn't, you walk forward without regret. Either way, you keep your dignity. Either way, you keep your center. Either way, you win. If this message hit home, tell me in the comments, have you ever waited on silence longer than you should have? Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever.